This is Clarence. He is 1 year old today. These are his friends. Like all babies, they were born with 100 billion neurons, nearly twice as many as an adult, even though their brains are half the size. Their brains are growing faster than any other part of their bodies. 60% of their metabolism is being spent on growing their brains. By 3, their brain volume will have doubled. But those 100 billion neurons will not stay forever. As the children move, play, and learn, these neurons are being connected into circuits. Circuits that govern emotions, motor skills, and speech. The circuits that are used get reinforced. The circuits that are neglected get pruned away. What remains is a basic structure that will influence the rest of their life. It is how they will see the world. It will influence their thinking, feelings, their joys and fears. Most of how the world will seem, how they will
I'm sorry, there was a little glitch and the screen sharing stopped and we're having to start over again.
So thank you everybody for coming and joining us on this evening. We are just so excited to be with all of you. And thank you to our esteemed guests that we have joining us here tonight. Senator Robert Creigh Deeds from the great state of Virginia. And I've had spent some time in Virginia, and as I was reflecting on the years that you run for Attorney General or Governor, I was spending some time in DC. So thank you for your public service, as well as you have had your own circumstances regarding violence within the home, and you're here to tell your story. And so thank you so very much for joining us here tonight. And then also we have State Representative Lisa Cutter here from Colorado. Thank you so much for joining us. Lisa had an esteemed career, and during that time decided to pivot as a mom in a journey and seeing where she needed to go. And she gave herself to us as a public service and a public servant to our community, and has represented a district in the southwest part of Denver, Colorado. Thank you both so much for joining us here tonight. Senator Deeds, we'd love to start with you tonight. And in reflecting on the movie, in the clip, you say, you feel a great responsibility to improve our system for how we deal with mental health and illness. Where does this sense of responsibility come from? But more importantly, why is it important to you?
You know, I've been in the legislature for nearly 30 years. In my early years, I always, mental health was always an important issue. And certainly after the shooting at Virginia Tech in 2007, I was there the next day. I was on the campus the next day. I knew kids at Virginia Tech. I knew parents who had kids at Virginia Tech. I knew faculty members at Virginia Tech. I knew a kid that hid in a broom closet for half a day. So mental health took on a different meaning then. And then once it became more personal, it became more of my focus the last 7 years. I'm determined to try to fix it so that people in need, no matter where they are in Virginia, have access to the services they need.
what are we missing in that? What do you think that when we talk about that piece, like what the important, why should it, when people think about it, it may not, it doesn't happen to me or it's happening to my neighbor. When it happens to us, it really becomes personal. How
Yeah,
can we,
that's the case. Every state is different. In Virginia, it's two things. It's a matter of organization and it's a matter of resources. We've got to make sure we have the services organized in the right way so that they can be relevant and available to people in every part of the state. And we've got to back that up by making sure we put the local and the state resources to the task so that we can provide those services when they're needed.
are either of you able to hear Lisa?
I'm not able to hear Lisa.
I'm sorry.
There
I'm
we go.
sorry.
Now I can.
There we can, Lisa.
I am here.
Yes. So thank you both so much. And this is just what happens when you're live, right?
Yeah.
But this conversation is so important. So Lisa, I want to toss it to you.
Yeah. I wanted to ask Senator Deeds. He said it was personal. Could you tell us what happened that made it so personal? It's an amazing story.
My son, I was blessed. I've been blessed to be part of 4 pregnancies, 4 beautiful children. And my son was just absolutely brilliant. One of the most capable people I've ever come across. I could tell stories all day long about the things he did in his life. He was valedictorian of his high school class. He went to the College of William and Mary. He was Dean's List student there. He could play any instrument he wanted to play. He was a virtuoso clawhammer banjo player. Opened a show for Ralph Stanley, a legendary banjo player, once with the harmonica. He was unbelievable. He could speak any language. He put his mind to learning. But when he was about 21, he started showing signs of illness. And he was diagnosed as bipolar about 21, and the last few years of his life were tough. And we had a rare, we lost Gus almost 7 years ago. And so it became a personal issue for me.
And it wasn't just that you lost Gus. It was even more complicated than that.
It was terribly complicated. The first time he ever mentioned the notion of suicide to me, I went through the process of having him, when in Virginia we call it an emergency custody order was issued, and then evaluation occurs. He's temporarily detained. He was held for a couple of days, hospitalized. I'll never forget. I went to see him in the hospital. He said, "Dad, this is where I belong. They just have to get my medicine right." Well, about 6 months later, I had to go through the same process again. My beautiful son was devolving. He had so much confidence. He was everything that I wasn't. He was perfect. And I bargained with him after we went through this couple of times, and I got him back to school. I got him back on the dean's list. Everything was great. I had him on medicine, but once he was away from me, he figured, I've determined now that probably the last 10 or 11 months of his life, he was totally off medicine. When I said anything to him about it, he'd say, "Dad, that's none of your business." But toward at the very end, Gus, we had there was some violence, and Gus, kind of attacked. Gus attacked me, and then he pretty much got me out of the picture, he thought, and then he ended his life.
Senator Deeds, thank you. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing your story and being with this. As a parent, that has endured this, your story is going to be one that can help another parent out there.
Well, I think about that's it. I mean, that's what it has to be about. We only get to live this life. We only get one life. We have to make it count, and it has to count for more than just the money we make, or for more than just what we can do for ourselves. We have to be able to make a difference.
So true. So true. Representative Cutter, Lisa, as a parent, somebody who lives in the Columbine neighborhood, who has walked this path, we'd love for you to talk about how Columbine, American tragedy, and your story, and your fight for this cause.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and or for having us here tonight. And I want to just say that I so honor Senator Deeds and
Yes.
Sue Klebold, who's part of this film, and Lisa Saby, who's part of this making of this film, everyone who's working in this space, but particularly those people who have come to this place because of great personal pain and tragedy. I honor that so deeply. That is a true hero to me, and I mean that very seriously. So thank you for your work. Yes, I've lived in the Columbine area, not probably about 8 to 10 minutes west of Columbine for 25 years, and we remember when the tragedy occurred and how painful it was for the entire community and how scary it was, and having to explain to our children were quite small at the time. But one of the things I remember most about it, and I think this is interesting to me because it echoes, and we may get into this later, but it echoes a little bit of some of the themes of the film. I remember how badly I felt for the parents of Klebold and Harris, because they, the perpetrators, because everyone else lost their children, which is a tragedy that I can't even imagine. But those parents lost their children who took the lives of other children. They could not celebrate their children and remember them in the same way. And I felt that was just so horrible to me. And they weren't always treated very nicely by the community, to be honest. And so there was a lot of blame. And I've always thought, I've always really believed that every human is, there's no blame. No one understands why these things happen. And there's no blame. I think most people are doing the best they can to be good people, good parents, good members of the community. And every human deserves the opportunity to be uplifted and helped if they can. And I certainly wish that was the case for all of the parents who have experienced that kind of pain, that their children could have been helped. But who knows why those things happen. So yeah, it was certainly something that's shaped the way I look at a lot of, the ongoing, there's certainly been so many more school shootings and horrible incidents like that. And it sort of did launch a journey into interest in mental health and what creates that kind of situation. And throughout my career, I did a little bit of work with some suicide prevention programs as well. And as a legislator, have worked in that space as a member of the Public Health Committee. So I'm really pleased to champion anything I can that will help change the way we look at mental health.
Let's watch a clip from the movie that talks about blame. And I think one of the most dangerous things we can do is to simplify a very complex equation, and blame one thing or two things instead of realizing it's a myriad of things. It's a whole incredibly huge group of variables that came together, and we all need to take responsibility to do what we can. Let's try it.
I started writing about this because we all thought, that when you look back, when you go through life in those houses that these kids grew up in, you'll find something. You'll find warning signs. People blamed the Harrises and the Klebolds because everyone believes that you have to recognize a monster when it lives with you. I think one of the things we may have learned in the 20 years since then is that that's not true.
Senator Deeds, did people ever blame you, or did you ever feel the limit of blame? Can you talk to us about how dangerous it is to simplify a complex equation by blaming?
There are, I've lived, for better or worse, I've lived a public life, and that means that there are people, I've got my share of detractors out there, and there have always been people that have been willing to blame me for my son's death and my son's condition, it is what it is. I try to ignore it and just move on.
I commend you for that, right? That's powerful to be able to do that, right? To be able to separate that and to be able to move on. I think that's also part of healing. As someone who leads a mental health organization, I commend you for that because it takes a while to get there, but to be able to voice that, I think is so powerful, Senator Deeds. And so thank you for that. I think in hearing some of your frustration, I can sense in the voice. I wonder, can you speak to why, since Columbine, we have passed minimal legislation and why it's been so difficult to pass legislation at the local, state, national level?
I will tell you that mental health is not a partisan issue, and they're Democrats, they're Republicans, they're independents, they're all sorts of people that want to fix the problem, but very few people will actually do the work to raise the money it takes to fix the problem. And ultimately, it is a matter of organization. You've got to have your systems, your institutions, and your local public health organizations organized properly. But you also have to pay for things. You have to pay for people. You have to pay for
yes,
and that takes a willingness to
yes,
cast the hard votes to raise the money. So it's easy for us as policymakers to say what ought to happen. It's more difficult to say, this is how we're going to pay for it.
Reverend Lisa, you live in Colorado. We have become a state known for multiple mass shootings and tragedies. You would think that it would be so easy and we'd have 99 of our legislators voting in one way. Why has it been so difficult in this state that has been so pained by these types of shootings?
You know, that's a really great question, and I wish I had the perfect answer, but I think it's a willingness for everyone to put the focus. You talk about, Senator Deeds talks about the money and putting the resources behind it, and that's definitely the issue. And I think our problem is we, generally speaking, as a culture, we want to look at punishment. We want to look at fixing something and band-aiding something at the end. And I would like to see us, but that's a huge shift when you think about it. That's like turning the Titanic. There's a lot to that. That's, not to go off the rails here, but that's part of the defunding the police question, is how we put more money into, which is obviously not, for people not familiar with it, not completely defunding the police. That's not what that means. But that means shifting the way we look at things and the way we structure things so that we put our money and our energy and our focus on the front end, on preventing these things, on providing mental health, on providing support for young parents and families and school children. There's a great example of a school in this one. Dawson, is it, Lisa?
Yes, Dawson.
I was so impressed. I want to go visit them now. Those are the kinds of things we need to be doing, but that's a huge culture shift. That's not how we look at things right now. And it's just going to take a lot of us continuing to ring the bell and do what we can. And, eventually maybe we'll reach critical mass, but it's a whole different way of doing things.
Lisa, I think
treating people.
Yeah, I think you hit on the core message of American tragedy. And the core message is that we cannot maintain the paradigm that we wait for a mental illness or for behavioral issues to arise. We have got to say they will arise, but let's start early on. Let's start at birth. Let's start in the elementary school, in the preschools. Let's empower parents to know how to parent for mental wellness. And I know that the suicide loss survivors I've talked with and Sue, they all have said we've got to help parents know how to teach their children the skills. We have got to help parents have a sense of empowerment that they can help their child. We cannot get rid of all mental illnesses. That will never happen. But we can develop mental wellness. That can happen. And to me, that was the main message. And if you were to identify for you what the main message was, what would you say? Lisa, and then Senator Deeds.
Well, I think that's true. I think that we can change. We can empower. I really loved, I mentioned the school and the children. I love that because I firmly believe in that by teaching mindfulness and by teaching kids how to talk about their feelings, and we have such a repressive culture in a lot of ways, and the more you can do that, I think we can create some change. And I think that was a big message of the film that I took away for sure.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The message to me really was that this sort of tragedy can and does happen anywhere, and can happen to anybody. Mental illness is not going to go away. We need to tear down the wall of stigma that surrounds mental illness.
Yes.
Prevented people and prevented parents from seeking help for centuries. The stigma around mental health begins with us. You know, begins with the way we talk.
Yes.
The language we use influences children. We pass on the stigma. We've got to change the way we talk, the way we think about mental health, and we need to understand. We need to acknowledge the brain as part of the body, and that we have to take care of our mental health the same way we take care of our physical health.
Absolutely.
For the audience, if you want to text in questions, the number is 307-655-6396. Again, 307-655-6396.
So, you know, I'm feeling this passion from both of you and in the work that you both do. And so I want to shift a little bit and pivot to solutions, right? I think both of you as policymakers, as public servants, it's all about solutions. You get up there, you take the harassment, you do the work you do. What are some of the most promising solutions you see out there right now? Either policy, community-oriented, avenues for advocacy. In particular, I'd love to hear what is happening in Colorado and in Virginia in the I-95 corridor, because that's a busy corridor. But Lisa, with you, here in Colorado, we're starting to wake up a little bit. And what are you seeing first?
Yeah, I think so. We've done, you know, it never moves as quickly as you wanted to. And a lot of things were set aside this year because of COVID and having to, you know, focus on issues directly related to that. But there's been some movement towards a colleague of mine, Daphna Michelson-Janae, who does quite a bit of work in mental health as well. I'm sure you probably know her. She was working on a bill to create a mental health exam, wellness checkup once a year with no cost. And the governor vetoed that this year. So because of cost to insurance, I think. So I know she will bring that back, and I know she will have my wholehearted support in that. We've done, we did succeed. I worked with Representative Michelson-Janae on a bill to provide an excuse for mental health sick days. So you call in sick and get a school pass for being sick. You can do the same thing for a mental health day. So I think I've done some other work I passed legislation last year on parity, which exists at the federal level, mental health and physical health parity. And it exists at the federal level, but we just did some things in the state to shore that up and make it more enforceable and, you know, make entities more accountable in the state of Colorado to that, because it wasn't really occurring the way it was mandated to by the federal law. So I think that's really important. And I think Senator Deeds, talked about that, the stigma. I think that's something that's really, really important. And that's why parity is important to me. And Daphna's idea of a mental health checkup. And, you know, yeah, you can have a mental health day if you need to from school. Those kinds of things. I think that's a theme that I see a lot and that I really want to continue to follow as well. The idea that let's just treat it like, yeah, I'm having a bad day. I mean, the more we can normalize that and talk about it, then things are going to start to shift and change. So that's where I hope we continue.
Senator Deeds.
It's really interesting to learn about other states. You're talking about the 95 corridor. Virginia really is 2 states.
Yeah.
The 95 corridor, the DC suburbs down to Richmond, east on 64 to Virginia Beach, is the southern part of Bosnia-Wash, and it's kind of the golden crescent of Virginia. That's where our prosperity and our population and our resources are. The rest of Virginia is a horseshoe of Virginia, from the eastern shore out to Emporia, down to the Cumberland Gap, up to Luray. 1.8 million people. If you looked at educational attainment, we would be, we were a separate state, we'd be 51st. And in terms of educational attainment, we just don't have resources. So you're talking about Gosh is right, but we're not Montana. We're not West Texas. We're not Alaska. We have big problems, big problem areas to provide resources, but we can do it. What I've tried to do is figure out a way to make sure we have resources in every part of the state. And we've developed a plan called Step Virginia to build up our resources, to take our list of mandated services, which were 2 when we started this work, to ultimately to 10. It's about $150 to $160 million a year program when we get it fully paid for. But we've been doing it in steps. And as Lisa pointed out, we got stuck by COVID-19 too. We had to put about $2.2 billion of spending on hold, and a whole bunch of that was healthcare related, and a bunch of that was mental health related. That's step 1. Step 2, we're trying to figure out the balance between institutional care and community care. And our communities are CSPs.
Yeah.
What I've tried to do is integrate the CSBs with our public school system, I'm trying to provide mental health education as early as possible, and also have the CSBs integrated with our jails, because our jails are actually our biggest mental health providers in the state. We spend about 51% of our mental health dollars right now on our hospitals, on our mental health hospitals, and nationwide, most states spend around 30%. So there's a real, we probably don't spend enough money totally, but we spend too much on institutional care. So we're trying to figure those things out. And honestly, we've taken a significant number of steps in the right direction, but I'm anxious to get back to work on it. And we will, once we get this pandemic behind us. That might take a little while.
And from my own experience, we often talk about what can we do to help those people with mental illnesses, but seldom talk about how can we help the family support them.
Right.
How can we give the family skills to deal with a child who's hard to deal with? Or how can we give the family skills to help a child open up about the dark world he's experiencing? I think in American Tragedy, that was one of the common denominators, the Sue story and Lori's story and Lisa Neeson's story, that they had no idea that their son darkness was to the point of wanting to die. And so I think that isn't, and we can't legislate families, but how can we empower parents to get the support that they need, and that will help their children probably more than anything else we could do? Senator Deeds, I'll let you start with that one.
Well, the federal privacy law is sometimes misunderstood to the point that doctors who are afraid of getting sued will not even talk to family members about mental health issues or any health issue that relates to family member. And I've tried my best to get that changed at the federal level, and I wasn't successful. So I think there are still ways that we have to educate the medical profession, that there are ways to share some basic information without violating a person's privacy. Because you are dead on. The families have to be empowered to be engaged in their loved ones' lives.
Representative Cutter?
Thank you. I alluded to this earlier on. I think that we have so much focus on the backside of things and, cleaning up messes and fixing things in our society. I would like to see more focus put on early intervention. And I just popped into my brain. There was a program, our former governor, Roy Romer, years and years ago, his wife started, I don't know if you remember that, started a program called Bright Beginnings. And I believe it might still be around. I need to look that up.
By 3 now.
Pardon me?
It's called Bright by 3.
Oh, fabulous. So things like that, but we need to do more things to intervene when kids and families are young, and especially at risk or disadvantaged communities. We need to reach out and try to provide the supports so that they have a place to go when they need help, and they have, if a family is stable, a child is likely going to be more stable. And, to the degree that we can minimize the risk factors, if you will, although I know with mental health, that's not always predictable, but just create a stable family unit and create supports in the community for them through programming and counseling and intervention and people they can call on and rely on to provide help. To the degree that we can do that, I think we can start to change the dialogue a little bit around some of this stuff. But I really firmly believe in that. Oh, and I would like to mention before I forget too, we also passed legislation last year on having children, this sort of speaks to the early ages, having children 12 and up have the ability to see a school counselor without letting their parents know, or see a therapist without letting getting permission. And I think that's really important too, because I mean, it might be that the child is afraid of their parent, or the parent is part of the problem, but even probably more frequently, they don't want to worry their parents. And they don't want to, they're afraid to rock the boat. Dad's job isn't going so well, or mom is super stressed, whatever. So this gives them a safe place to talk, in the meantime.
We are going to spend the rest of the time answering viewers' questions. And this first question is from Rick Padilla. Rick Padilla's son, Jack, died a year and a half ago. And Lisa, you know him. And it says, what I consider phase 2 of COVID, social injustice, isolation, et cetera, and the resulting impact is just now emerging. I think we as a community need to focus on 4 to 6 things we can accomplish in the next 2 years. I would like to hear the speaker's thoughts on what those actionable items are.
Great question.
Does he mean in regards to mental health, the things that we can accomplish?
I would assume, because he is over the suicide prevention.
Yeah. Senator Deeds, do you want to?
Well, I'll jump in there. What we're trying to do in Virginia is beef up services at our community service boards. So the number one thing I want to try to do is figure out how to reduce spending at our institutions and put more resources in community services. I want Virginia to be more like the national average, which is about, as I said, 70% in community services, 30% in institutions. The second thing I want to do is figure out what the right mix is, whether we have the right number of community service boards or not, how we can best make sure every part of the state has services. As I said, there's a horseshoe of Virginia that's not very wealthy. I live in the horseshoe. There are communities that don't have the resources that others do. I want to make sure that no matter where you are in Virginia, if you have a need, it's going to be met. We're going to have resources there. The third thing I want to do is figure out what the right mix is between the state and the local government in terms of paying for this. As I said, one of the hard questions is figuring out how to pay for things. Well, in Virginia, the state law is the state spends 90%, the locality spends 10%, but they don't have to if they have a hardship. Well, there are a bunch of localities that don't do their fair share. And my experience is the community services work best in those communities that are invested in it. So they have to have some skin in the game, and I want to figure that out. I want also to make sure, we've worked very hard the last, I guess, 2 or 3 years to make sure that we have some mental health awareness training in our schools. And I'm not sure that that's working quite right yet. I want to make sure that we've incorporated into our health curriculum, which is split with our physical education. And I want to make sure that there is mental health awareness, because I think that's going to help us tear down the stigma. And if you don't mind me throwing out a fifth one, what I want to do is make sure that every police officer in the state has crisis intervention training. Because I think that's the key, that the intersection of criminal justice and mental health is huge. And I think the key to getting people the services they need and diverting people from the criminal justice system is when a police officer is called out, he or she has de-escalation skills built in and can help to figure out whether the person they're encountering really is a criminal or whether they're just ill.
And wouldn't it be amazing if all of us had de-escalation skills?
Absolutely.
We could use,
I would like for every first responder, not just every police officer.
I'd like it for every parent.
I think it's good. Mental health first aid is an 8-hour course. There's no excuse for all of us not to have that.
Right.
CIT training is a 40-hour course. That requires a little more commitment.
Representative Cutter.
Thank you. Gosh, great ideas. We need to talk more, Senator Deeds. we can swap some things. So I want to say, well, hello. I'm so glad that Mr. Padilla, that Rick is joining us tonight. When I was thinking about heroes, he falls into that category as well. Rick is an amazing man. His son committed suicide a few years ago, and he testified in our public health committee, and I was so moved by his story and just by what he's done, going out and trying to make the world better, based on the pain he's experienced. And so I will say the very first thing I hope to accomplish in the next few years is I've been working on a piece of legislation with Rick, and it's called Jack's Law in honor of his son, and it's really dealing with bullying in the schools and trying to create some more accountability around that for parents and involvement and transparency around the way the schools are handling that. So we're in the middle of an intense stakeholding process when COVID came up, so we had to table that for a little bit, but we're definitely going to be going back to that. And I think Rick and I share the same sensibility in terms of that bill in particular, that the bullied and the bully are both to be, dealt with in a compassionate way. That doesn't mean people should be able to do bad things and have no consequences, but again, taking away that punitive piece and really caring and enveloping our children in a loving, caring, supportive environment and problem-solving kind of way. So I'm really excited about that piece of legislation, and so we'll be working on that. I think the other things, I mentioned the exams. I think we would really like to see that throughout the state, that insurance had to cover mental health exams the same as they do physical health exams, or actually with no copay is what the bill was, I believe. So I'd like to see that as a function of normalizing and just everyone getting a checkup and feeling okay about that. More behavioral health providers in schools. So the ratio is just not acceptable right now. So we'd like to up the ratio in all K through 12. So kids have had the ability to talk to someone when necessary. And then also I really, that theme of, shifting expenditures and focus away from so much policing, but, let's provide them the tools and shift some of that towards mental health supports. I think we're asking quite a bit of law enforcement right now and first responders. We're asking them to do a lot of things. And I'd like to see the way that might be a longer term thing, but I'd like to see that shift the way we approach that.
Thank you. We have an important, and if we don't answer any questions that people send in, we're very sorry. And we realize this is a very sensitive subject, and we definitely want to answer the questions. This is one that I think Senator Deeds will be able to relate to. And so this one is for you, Senator Deeds. My brother, Jonathan Carrillo, passed away from suicide and had reached out to many resources. His college counselor, 5 different therapists, 2 of which counseled appointments with him within the final weeks of his life, Alta Hospital and the suicide hotline. Why are these resources not helpful in helping him? What can we do differently?
That's really a good question. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for Mr. Padilla's loss too. It's not the kind of thing you plan on, and that's for sure. We have to build a system that is responsive to people's needs, and I don't know how. I don't know where you are, and I don't know what specifically is responsible for the failures in the system you had. But in my own case, I can tell you that you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. You do the best you can with the resources that are available, but ultimately, I would not have tried to. I would not have committed my son twice. I would not have tried a third time if I had choices. If he had responded by keeping his appointments or taking his medicine. The night before my son died, I tried to have him committed, and they didn't have any room at the inn, so to speak. They couldn't find a bed for him. And when I took him home that night, I knew that it was going to be tough. I knew that we were in a tough spot. So I don't know specifically why your system failed, but what we have to do be about proactively is building a system that's responsive to people in need, no matter where they are. And candidly, out in the world where I live, where there's a lot of open space between people, we're going to have to think about services differently too. We're probably going to rely more and more on telemedicine. We're going to have to need in some of these rural parts of Virginia and America.
And I would like to just voice my own kind of awareness that so often parents of and brothers and sisters of victims of suicide feel guilty. They blame themselves. And, we watch the movie American Tragedy, and we see how, we can't blame this Sue. She's a good person. She did not raise Dylan to be a school shooter. And Lori did not raise her son, Chris, to die by suicide. And Lisa did not raise her son, Adam, to die by suicide. But they did. And the moms and the brothers and the sisters and the cousins, they can blame themselves. And that can be so hard for so many years. And I think we need to be very aware that when we're dealing with mental illness or dealing with a suicide, we are dealing with a lot of people who are being affected, not the singular one that is we're focused on. And we need to broaden the understanding and broaden the outreach if we are going to be effective. I don't know if either one of you want to respond to the self-blame, the trauma of years. Senator Deeds,
when something like this happens, and I can only speak from my own experience. I don't know what other people live through, but you spend every day re-examining every step you've taken your whole life. My son was 24 when he died, and the last encounter we had was very difficult and very painful. And I for a long time I would just wander around out in the woods behind my house, saying the Serenity Prayer and just imagining him as a baby or as a little boy. Pictures of him when he was happy. You never get over something like that. It lives with you every day. You learn to live with it. But you constantly wonder, what could I have done? The Serenity Prayer taught me basically to you control the things you can, you change the things you can, the things you can't control, you have to let go. It's hard. It's awful hard. It's easier said than done.
Yeah, thank you though for that. You've shown us a great path in being able to do that, Senator Deeds, and in your voice, I can feel the journey as a victim of violence myself and gun violence, and having lost numerous people to suicide. I think about this issue, and it's very complex in terms of mental health and school shootings and suicide. And people, the vernacular here used to be they commit suicide, now they die by suicide. And when we think about that mental wellness piece, as we get ready to close here, I would love for you both just to share with us and give our audience maybe 2 action points of what they can do today, tomorrow, what they can be aware of, right? I think for those of us that have been through this, there's always that reflective of like, I could have seen this, but what are just 2 action steps instead of reflecting back? What's something we can do going forward?
Okay, and I've done a lot of talking, so I'm not going to talk much.
Please stop.
Number one, watch your language. Think about the things you say, because when you talk about somebody as crazy or nuts, you just perpetuate the stigma. And number 2, don't be so judgmental. Think about the journey that everybody walks. You don't know what kind of journey they're walking. Don't be so judgmental. Try to be kind to your neighbor. The golden rule still is the rule. Treat other people the way you want to be treated.
Thank you.
Perfect. Love that. Well, I those things are awesome steps, and I just think talking to people about your feelings and normalizing that and saying, I think we're all kind of the language thing really resonates for me as well. I'm a communicator was my career. And I think it's really important to be real and be authentic. That doesn't mean you have to be a downer, but when you're just programmed to say, how are you? Oh, great. I mean, it's okay with your friends and family and to share those feelings and to share those things. And I think if we just, and this also kind of piggybacks on something you said, Senator Deeds, but I think we all just need to approach things with less blame and more in judgment and more love and more compassion. I mean, if we, even when we don't agree with people, that's the heart of everything. No human being, and I felt this watching the film as well, is that every human being has value. Every human being deserves our love and our care and help in lack of judgment. I mean, people do bad things. That doesn't mean they're bad people. So I just try to focus on doing my job and living through that lens. Some days better than others, but trying to live with love.
We're all humans. Thank you.
I love it. And what I want is every person to kind of commit to be kind to people who are different than them. In a world where we're so polarized, if you're a Republican, be kind to the Democrats. If you're a Democrat, be kind to the Republicans. Speak kindly of one another and find common denominators. I am so grateful to Senator Deeds and Representative Cutter for tonight's their time and their passion and their lives that have connected them with people who have had journeys that have been complicated. And from making American tragedy and trying to decide what is our vision, it is that we all individually need to commit to brain fit for ourselves, for our loved ones, and for our communities. And if we don't, we will not make the progress we must make for the future. Thank you all for joining. Subscribe to our YouTube, watch American Tragedy, share it with others, review it. We want this to be a conversation about making a better community for tomorrow. Good night.